Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor and Blake Cripps. This is Keeper of the Game.
Some may say that we are wildly unqualified. Some may say that we are only mildly entertaining. I say, how in the hell did we get to 100 episodes of the Keeper of the Game podcast, the only podcast focusing on sports in and around and of interest to Wichita, Kansas? I am Blake Cripps, joined on this historic episode by Tommy Castor. Here we are, episode 100, and it's just going to kind of be a regular episode, but a little bit of a milestone for us. What do you think?
Yeah, it really is. We've been doing this podcast, I believe, it's been like 2.5 years.
For you, probably,
since we launched this podcast. Yeah, Weston Mills and myself started it back in, I believe, January of 2020. It was right before COVID started. Yeah. We made it, the first 50 episodes pretty quickly. I think we did 48 episodes in year one. And then it's kind of slowed down a little bit.
It's amazing what you can get done
we're still
when you have
trucking
nothing
along.
else to do.
That's very true. We're still trucking along, though. And, of course, Weston is no longer on the show on a regular basis. Blake, you've stepped in, and you and I have been doing the show ever since. And actually, we need to extend a congratulations to Weston and his family. They had another baby this week.
I think I heard something about that.
Earlier this week, I want to say Sunday or Monday, they had a little baby boy. So that's number 2 for the Mills family. And I think that pretty much solidifies he's never
Sure.
coming back.
Yeah. And then it seems to be unlikely at this point. My question is, do you think that this will be as iconic of a shot as the Wilt Chamberlain one with the 100 for 100 points? Maybe not quite as good.
I mean, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I doubt it. I think I can say with some level of certainty.
No,
probably not.
Brock Bowling, who started at KSAL, I actually got to meet him. I had lunch with Chris Allison. He actually did the game on ESPN2. I think it was on the Deuce for the basketball tournament at Coke Arena, which, boy, that was a wild game. We'll have to mention that later in the show. But he did one because it was his 100th event earlier this year on ESPN. So I stole the idea from him. So thanks for the idea, Brock. Coming up on the show today, after we tell you about every place that you can get the show and have been able to for probably about 99 of the last 100 episodes. Of course, cogsports.com, at cogpod on Twitter, cogpod.podomatic.com, and all of the audio, all the places. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, so many more options. Of course, the videos on our Facebook page and also on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate any feedback that you have for us as well. You can get in touch with us on Twitter. We'll give you our Twitter links at the end of the show. And, of course, if you are watching the show, they are in the profile pictures right at the bottom of your screen. Coming up today, Self and Townsend held out of recruiting. What does this mean for KU basketball? We're also going to run down some of our favorite stories and segments that we've ever done on the CogPod. A little look back here at the history of the show. But we're going to begin today with talking a little bit more in depth about Wichita State's new AD, a Manhattan native, Kevin Saal. This was kind of overblown because of all of the rush of conference realignment stuff that we had to cover on our last show. I didn't feel like we wanted to, shorten this segment. This deserves to be the lead segment of the show. It's a very, very big deal for Wichita State. So we're going to talk about it now. Of course, he's previously the athletic director at Murray State, and there have been 2 big words that have been associated with Kevin Saal as he's come in to Wichita State that he's been using over and over. He seems to be a very big branding guy because he's got his 15-1. He is very much the branding catchphrase kind of guy, which, I mean, I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm just saying that that's how it is. That's a fact. But it's been transparency and accountability. Those have been the 2 things that he will talk your ear off to in every interview, every time that he's with the media. It's transparency and accountability. And the third thing, the secondary thing, and probably the most important thing and most interesting thing for Wichita State Shocker fans is competing for American Athletic Conference championships in every sport is what he wants to build the program on. That's what he wants to make the kind of the brand, the blueprint for his success, what he perceives to be his success at Wichita State, is they need to, the Shockers, compete for an American Athletic Conference championship in every single sport. So let's start first with the hire, the man, Kevin Saal, coming from Murray State, which if you look at, kind of the trajectory of how these jobs are typically hired, especially at this spot, not that you can't go from Division II to Division I, in an athletic department. You typically don't do that at an athletic director level. Typically, you'll jump to an assistant at a D1, but you look at where Murray State is as a program, where Wichita State is as a program, it seems to be a pretty natural evolution for a guy who wants to be at, a higher level of being an athletic director. What do you think of Kevin Saal, the Wichita State fan, who claims to be the guy who grew up watching and loving Shocker baseball? I know Shocker baseball fans probably in love with that, but a Manhattan, Kansas native who has spent time in the Sunflower State, now coming back. What do you think of the hire?
I said when we were talking about what the selection committee would be looking for in a new athletic director that I thought it was going to be imperative that if the Shockers were able to get somebody with prior athletic director experience holding that top job, that was going to be a win for the Shockers. And we talked about Kevin Saal a little bit, listed as one of the
he was on our list, wasn't he?
Targets for Wichita State. Yeah, we talked about him. I know Taylor Eldridge had mentioned him from the Wichita Eagle alongside several other potential candidates. He definitely seemed like the one that had the pedigree, the best pedigree to come in to this job, and had the ties back to the state of Kansas, which I think is important for sure. I watched his introductory press conference. I followed, some of the remarks that he has made since he joined Wichita State. I think it's a good hire. The big difference that I've noted already in the first few weeks of his tenure versus Darren Boatwright, and I don't want to disparage Darren Boatwright at all, because he had, some success there at Wichita State, but just their personalities seem fairly different. From what I could always tell from Darren Boatwright, more reserved, a little bit more behind the scenes, I feel like. Wasn't necessarily a, want to come out and give speeches kind of guy. Wasn't super, I don't want to say he wasn't personable because I don't know him personally, but just a little bit more reserved, I think, is kind of the word that I would use, where Kevin Saal is really front and center, and wanting to kind of be the face of, the athletic department, which he should be in that role. So I think that's a nice change for sure. But really, speeches are one thing, introductory press conferences are one thing, but the results, that will be the litmus test for sure. And, transparency is important. Accountability is important, sure. But I think some other words that really need to be focused on, we talked about it before, is revenue.
Fundraising.
Conference revenue and NIL and fundraising. I mean, that's where the world of college athletics is. And we all know that is where Wichita State has been lagging behind up until now. So him coming in and having a clear plan and direction and how he wants to steer the ship, I think is really important in this crucial transition time in college athletics. And I think it lines up pretty nicely that you've got Wichita State going through this transition at the same time that the entire college athletics landscape is going through a transition. So they can sort of move through it together, which I definitely think is helpful.
We talked about, what probably in all likelihood cost Darren Boatwright his job was his lack of proactivity in this space. The NCAA said, and I'm still not 100% behind that it was all his fault, but certainly at the end of the day, if you're a good coach, you take responsibility for your team. Even if the team didn't play well, unless you're Bill Self, in which case you just throw your players under the bus and you don't care because you're Bill Self. But most coaches take the responsibility when their team doesn't play well. Hey, that's on me. I didn't have the guys in the right position to be successful. Darren Boatwright did not have the athletic program in the right spot to be successful. he hasn't talked that much, Kevin Saal has, about NIL and, in terms of the specifics. He has talked about a lot of those. He's talked a lot about those buzzwords that you've mentioned to him. But I would have to think that the NIL opportunities at a spot like Wichita State, that's got local businesses and has got, so many boosters, that I think, may still have a somewhat frayed relationship with the athletic department based on the fact that Greg Marshall is no longer the basketball coach, and based on the fact that Wichita State baseball is not exactly what it used to be. I think those are the two big, kind of, let's say, divorces that the fans and boosters who had been with the program for an extended amount of time and contributing significant dollars previously, that's probably the hang up for them. I think a lot of the other programs, everybody loves Coach Lamb and volleyball. I think those volleyball fans at Wichita State would probably run through battery acid for Chris Lamb. And if there's anybody who would not run through fire for the softball program, then they need to just find another program to be a fan of, because they literally can't do anything else for you. Okay. They led literally the universe in home runs last year and have had the best 2-year stretch in softball history. So those two fan bases are being taken care of, and the attendance proves it. They have been selling out Wilkins Stadium, but at the end of the day, you and I both know that the straw that stirs the drink at Wichita State has to be and will always be men's basketball. Even if, Coach Adams gets women's basketball going again, I do think that there is a fan base that will support them. They supported Jody Adams. There is opportunity to grow there. But if basketball is not good, unless the baseball team is making the College World Series every year, which they ain't, men's basketball and baseball have to be one or the other, maybe not at the same time, because, thinking back, the times that men's basketball and baseball have been elite at the same time is pretty few and far between. Not a lot of overlap. Maybe some in the Mark Turgeon era, and when Gene Stevenson got things started in the 80s, there was definitely some overlap there. But getting those two programs at the top at the same time, I think that's going to be perhaps his biggest challenge, is how do I inject all this revenue in this economy where there's all this inflation and people are getting, clobbered. Obviously, the rank and file sports fan, the blue collar, people like you and me in our tax bracket are probably not the ones that he's going after. He's probably looking a few brackets above us to be, I'm thinking that Coke and Devlin and those kind of families are probably still got money to give around. But I think bringing those people back in is going to be his biggest challenge. The NIL stuff, I think, is going to come just because there is opportunity for the businesses there to make money as well. But I don't remember if it was you and me talking or if I was talking with somebody else. Because of all this NIL that has been happening, private donations seem to be trickling down. I think we talked about it on the last show. And,
we did.
There's something to be said about those boosters who have always supported and given money every year because they were supporting an education. They were supporting these kids and letting them have an opportunity to go and play and put money in their pocket, indirectly through scholarships and all that. Now, kids can kind of do that on their own, get on TikTok, get on YouTube. How will they bring those people? Can they bring those people back in? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think Kevin Saal, one of his challenges, and it's not a challenge unique to him as athletic director. It was a challenge for Darren Boatwright. It was a challenge for Eric Sexton. It's been a challenge for, any athletic director that Wichita State has had since 1986 is no football program. And obviously we don't need to get into the ins and outs of what that will look like.
Well,
in the future
they're going to bring it back, Tom.
We know football's not coming back. It's not going to happen.
Not happening.
I'd be shocked if it ever happened.
I would be shocked
in our
if
lifetime.
Kevin Saal even entertains a conversation on it at this point.
Right, 100%. But the challenge is, how do you operate and drive revenue to the athletic department in a world of NIL and in a world of conference realignment driven by TV deals, media deals with football without having a football program. And that was not necessarily something that Darren Boatwright, I know it was a challenge for him, but, Eric Sexton, same way. But both of them were athletic directors at Wichita State when there wasn't this massive nationwide transition in the landscape of media deals driven by college football. It's absolutely different right now. And we talked about it on the show last week about, what we could see happening with the Big 12 and these other conferences. It does trickle down to the American, and Wichita State is a non-football American school. And so what does it look like for them? And in a world of private donations where, a lot of big time donors at schools around the nation are dropping a ton of cash for football programs. And then now they've shifted those dollars, some of those dollars at least, to the NIL. Where does that leave schools that don't have football? And Wichita State is one of them. I think an argument can be made that, you're able to, concentrate those dollars a little bit more into, other programs like basketball and maybe even some of the women's sports programs and things like that, depending on how those dollars are earmarked. But then the other thought is, okay, well, because there's not football, there's not those, you're not driving as much revenue as a school that would have a football program, and you're not getting potentially as big of a share of a media rights deal because you don't have football. Again, not advocating that Wichita State even entertains a conversation.
I mean, if they did, it'd be awesome.
It's the reality.
But
they don't have a football program. Right.
It's not going to happen.
They don't have a football program. They're not getting a football program. So how do you operate in a world driven by college football and media deals driven by all of that? And so I think that's a challenge that Kevin Saal is going to have to encounter. And especially I don't think we're done with conference realignment. We already know the American is losing several teams going to the Big 12. They're gaining a handful of teams. It definitely is, I would say, a net loss
for sure.
the American as far as the caliber of teams in their conference moving forward. I don't think we're done overall. So how does Wichita State and Kevin Saal
you mentioned media deals. And I think if you're Wichita State, it is high time. It's been time for years. And I said this probably about 10 years ago, probably like 9 years ago now, right after the Final Four run. You need to create a statewide Wichita State sports radio network. I mean, why
I don't think it's ever
not?
Gonna happen.
Why? Why do all these other schools have one? And I realize the iron right now is not as hot as it was back in 2000. I still think that this is the biggest missed opportunity that Wichita State has had. When you've got, these stars, Ron Baker from Western Kansas, you're telling me those people in Scott City are not going to tune in to hear Wichita State basketball?
In 2014, absolutely.
I realize that it has cooled now, but I think that there is such a massive opportunity there, not just in terms of getting the Wichita State name out there, but in terms of growing the fan base more over the state, not just Sedgwick County and Reno County and Butler County and down in southeast Kansas. I realize that there are Shocker fans everywhere, but can you imagine KU or Kansas State not having a radio presence in Wichita?
Yeah, I guess my counter to that, and I'm not saying that I agree with this whatsoever, but I think there's been a mentality that Wichita State is not a regional draw, that Wichita State is a city of Wichita draw. And I think that there is an argument to be made that yes, there's a fan base outside of the Wichita metro, or outside of the terrestrial radio signal of what KUIN 103.7 can reach for Shocker men's basketball games. But I don't see, and we're not going to get into the world of radio necessarily, but I'm not necessarily sure that there's that much of an upside for a radio station in Dodge City or a radio station in Colby or a radio station wherever to pick up Wichita State with sponsorships and be able to make money off of it. And so I don't disagree with the premise as a whole. I just don't see it happening.
It's unfortunate that, and it might take finding the next Ron Baker. And then the next time that Shocker basketball is that hot, I would implore whoever is in charge at that time. Maybe it's 10 years from now. Maybe it's, 25 years from now. I mean, Greg Marshall's era was literally a once in a program era of Shocker basketball. And there was good times in the 60s and great times in the 80s. There ain't been no time like Greg Marshall's time. And maybe Isaac Brown's going to figure it out and get the guys back this year. We don't know. This is still, as far as I know, a pro Isaac Brown show. Unlike what seems to be like 95% of Wichita, which apparently doesn't think Isaac Brown could coach now, which we do not agree with on this program. But the next time that you have local Kansas kids in your program, they need to go. I don't even care who it's with. I mean, obviously 95% of the deals right now are with Learfield. But my point of bringing up KU and Kansas State is you cannot imagine KU not having a radio presence in Wichita. Like when Kansas State, there was a time when they did not have a radio presence in Wichita. And it was a big deal. Wichita State needs to be that kind of a deal statewide. It has to be a thing where, as a Shocker fan, as a Shocker athletic department, you say, we can't afford to not be on in Kansas City or Topeka or Russell, Kansas or Scott City or, Liberal, wherever. Pick, I'm not saying that you're going to get 30 radio sponsors overnight. That's not feasible. It's not realistic, but you ought to be looking at, can we get somebody in Pittsburgh, Hutchinson, growing it one station at a time? I think that it is a big opportunity. The other question I want to ask you before we move on, what does every sport need to get to the point of accomplishing Kevin's goal? Kevin Saal, new athletic director of Wichita State, is our conversation now, in terms of competing for an American Athletic Conference championship. That's the goal. And I know that some people are probably going to be saying, well, we ought to be going for a Final Four in men's basketball and all that. In most sports for Wichita State, if you're competing for an American Athletic Conference championship, you're going to be pretty damn good. We don't know, you and I, we don't know what life is going to be like in this new American. The level of competition is certainly going to be lower. What does that look like for Shocker softball? I think that's maybe the program that could take the biggest hit, because I don't know anything about these softball schools that are coming. I don't think that they're bringing that much to the table compared to some of those juggernauts that are leaving the conference to go to the Big 12. We also don't know what that's going to mean for men's basketball. There's an awful lot of those really, really good basketball schools that have been at the top near the Final Four that are going to be heading to the Big 12, specifically Cincinnati and Houston are the two that immediately popped to mind that are not going to be playing Wichita State every year. Those are really, really big losses in terms of strength of schedule, in terms of getting those quad 1 and 2 wins, because those are teams that have been perennially recently in the top 25. So that means you're going to have to really start pushing again, just like it was when the Shockers were in the Missouri Valley Conference, talking specifically about men's basketball. Boy, you really have got to jam the pedal down on the non-conference now to get those quality wins. It's going to be different for the other sports, for track and field, for volleyball, and women's basketball even. It's not going to be the same. So there are very many different sports, and those different sports have potentially very different needs. So how does Kevin Saal go about getting every sport what they need? Because all the programs are in different spots right now. Men's basketball coming off of a conference championship 2 years ago, major step back and a huge rebuild this year with so many new players. The women's basketball team just kind of treading water in mediocrity right now. Obviously, volleyball has had a couple of down years by Coach Lamb's standards, and softball, obviously, the hottest thing going right now. And certainly, when you mention baseball, that's a program that's been kind of underachieving for about a decade. So what does Kevin Saal need to do to get every sport to the point where they are competing for American championships?
Well, it's the age-old question, right? I mean, it kind of... You think of that chicken or the egg, scenario, and it's kind of like, all right, so the teams have to win to make more money, but you need more money to win. But I think it really comes down to budget. It comes down to revenue. For the entire athletic department, if they're able to raise more money and get more money into the budget for these programs, then they're going to have more of a more resources to compete at a high level. I always think back to the shocking stat, and I don't know it exactly, but when all the times we've talked about how god awful Kansas football has been.
Why does this come up every show?
More than a decade.
How bad we are.
But
I know
because it's relevant. Because I remember hearing one time about the budget that football had and the number of staff members and support staff members that Kansas football had, and analysts and assistants and things like that. And it paled in comparison to any other team in the Big 12. There was just no money
Northwest Missouri
so
State,
how are you going to be
honest?
Right. So how are you going to even think about competing at a high level if you don't have the resources to compete at a high level? And then people came back and said, well, you got to win before donations come. And you need the donations also to win. It's that, chicken or the egg, like I said. But I always think about that. And part of it, it absolutely comes down to the performance on the field on game days, right? Across the entire gamut of all the programs. But it also comes into the resources that these programs have. And again, when you are an athletic director for a Division I athletic department, your title, is athletic director, but it also probably should be /chief fundraising officer. Like, that is your job. You have got to go to the big hitters and the fundraisers, the ones who are willing to write the checks. Darren Boatwright had admittedly lost the trust and the support of a lot of those major donors. He's got to get that back so the budget can stay high, so he can start and continue putting money where it needs to go, the resources and the programs where it needs to go, so they can perform at a high level. The other thing I want to point out is, and we don't need to necessarily get into a discussion about this, but the expectations for Shocker fans, especially in men's basketball, I've always heard they need to be going to a Final Four, like you just said. That was kind of lightning in a bottle. It was great when it happened. It was fantastic. It was fun to be along for the ride on that. It's not realistic, really, for a lot of teams, probably for nearly every team, to say they ought to go to the Final Four.
Five teams can probably say, we ought to go Duke, Kansas. I don't know. But I would have said Villanova, but with new coach, I'm not sure. Gonzaga probably feels like they should go. I mean, they should go to the Final Four every year. And think about
Kentucky
how good
feels
Gonzaga
like they should
has
go to the
been
Final Four every
and
year,
how little they have accomplished in terms of national championships. And it's still, I don't take anything away from, they're a great program. The best mid-major program by, from here to the sun and back 5 times. Okay? They're great. Yeah. But they have 0 championships and 1 Final Four under few. 1. And think about how good they've been.
And so... and so I feel like there are these,
and I'm not saying they shouldn't be lofty either.
Specifically,
I agree.
Sure, but they're unrealistic expectations, and I think that's part of the issue that I know Isaac Brown has ran into. And you're coming off of the Greg Marshall era, which was the most successful era in Wichita State men's basketball history, no doubt about it. But it's unsustainable expectations as well. And so I think that it's important to temper that a little bit and realize that, it's a whole new leadership structure now with Kevin Saal in place. Isaac Brown needs to be given some time to get his program the way that he wants it. And so I think that should not preclude people, the donors, the boosters, from picking up their checkbooks and giving back to that university, and not just saying, we're going to give NIL dollars. That's great. That's important. And I'm on board with that. But also, let's not forget that these programs at the university, they need the financial support as well, so they can continue to have
Wichita
the resources
State, of course,
to compete
getting things started with volleyball coming up here. And God, it is impossible for me to believe that we're going to be talking about the start of a new sports season in 2 weeks. It's July 29th as this is coming out. And we are 2 weeks away from like Division II sports starting with soccer and volleyball, and we're a month away from football, essentially, a month and 7 days or whatever. It's crazy how fast the calendar is turning. We're already here for 22-23. Speaking about what's not happening right now on the summer, Bill Self and his lead assistant coach, Kurtis Townsend, have been held out of the July live recruiting period. Of course, it's not a big secret right now that the NCAA case has still not been decided. This has been, I think, notice of allegations in September of 2019. They got a strongly worded response in May of 2020 from the NCAA. And since then, we have heard pretty much bupkis about this. This has been over 2 years since the strongly worded response, September 2019. We are coming up on, nearly a 4-year anniversary of this deal. And it's not even the only one. Arizona and Louisiana State, they both are still in this process as well, with the independent accountability resolution process created in the fallout from that FBI investigation involving, of course, several Adidas employees. Norm Roberts and Jeremy Case have been on the road throughout the spring and the summer, but Kurtis Townsend, Bill Self were held off the road. That's according to CBS Sports. They reported first. There was some local reporting after that. Of course, it's one of the biggest periods in college basketball recruiting. You've got all these summer leagues, all these teams, AAU, and of course, with the national champions not being out there with their head coach, it definitely is worthy of a response. So, Tommy, what's your response? Is this a big deal, little deal, or absolutely no deal at all?
I don't care. I mean, regardless if it's a big deal, I don't know. It might be a very big deal. I have no idea.
This is basically like a Blake Cripps on high school recruiting situation. Okay.
Sure. Tell me when there is a resolution. Tell me when the penalties are levied, when we actually have some finality in this, and then I'll care. And then I'll talk about whether it was a big deal or a little deal or absolutely no deal at all. Do I think that there are going to be penalties? Yeah, I do. I'm sure that there will be something. There's been speculation for months upon months upon months about what it would look like. Are we talking about postseason bans? Are we talking about suspensions for Self and Townsend? Are we talking about vacated victories, which I don't see necessarily that
Can't
going
believe that would be
far.
The case. Especially right now with this new era coming in. Players that never played for KU.
Right. What's so frustrating about this entire thing is that this was supposed to be handled by that independent body, which I think it still is under their
might as well just be like letters in a can of alphabet soup right now. They don't mean anything.
Right. Part of it, I think one of the reasons why it was decided by, I think, jointly by both Kansas and the NCAA to move it to this independent body, quote unquote, was for it to be handled expeditiously. That has not been the case at all. And you know what? I agree with you to an extent because, we have this independent body with the acronym.
I read it. I can find it.
I don't know.
The independent...
AARP? It sounds like what senior citizens get.
When they retire. No, it's IARP, the Independent Accountability Resolution Process, which so far,
who are they?
I mean,
they
are
independent. We don't know who they are.
And there's been a process, but there hasn't been much accountability.
Are they real?
And there's certainly no resolution at all. So I don't even know what they're doing at this point.
So, right. So again, it's exactly like you.
I understand it's a story, but I don't care.
I don't care. I don't care when when there actually is some resolution for both Kansas. And you know what? Yeah, like I said before, there's going to be penalties. I think that if you are a Kansas fan and you think this is just going to magically go away, I think you're mistaken. I think there's going to be something. And I think you could potentially see maybe a loss of some scholarships. I think you could potentially see some suspensions. It wouldn't shock me to see Bill Self have to sit out a little bit. I don't necessarily know, but we're going to see something.
Well, that's something
the question
that
is, will it be the
from what I
Century
have read, some of the speculation is among the people who know, which is neither person that is appearing on your screen right now if you're watching this program, because we don't know. But their speculation is that this is kind of an olive branch from Lawrence to the NCAA and say, hey, we've fought you tooth and nail. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to toss you a bone here. We're going to self-hold these guys out for the whole July. You guys and I, everybody knows how important this recruiting period is. Now, I mean, I don't know how much this actually hurts Kansas because, I think Norm Roberts and Jeremy Case can still recruit.
I don't think it hurts them at all.
Did they take Bill's cell phone away? I kind of doubt it. Bill Self and Kurtis Townsend are still kind of a big deal. Yeah. KU still is the defending national champions. But I think that they're doing this for the NCAA and said, hey, we're going to toss you a little bone here. Can we go ahead and just wrap this up? Because the stuff that we're accused of doing apparently now is just okay. And everybody's doing it. And, we had Matt Beatty on this show, and we've heard other people say, basically, literally everybody is doing this. KU just got caught, but everybody was doing that. I don't know if that's true or not. What I do know is the two players that have been mentioned and involved in these allegations and investigations, Zion Williamson, Billy Preston, who have played, remind me how much, oh yeah, that's right, 0 minutes for KU, 0 minutes. So I don't want to hear from all these fans who are telling me that they're going to take banners down and strip Big 12 championships. Come on. For what? For players who did not play a minute of ball for KU, they're going to sacrifice wins? I cannot in my life imagine that could possibly happen. Will there be a fine or, a loss of scholarships? Maybe they don't get to use a recruiting period in the future. I can see all of that happening. But right now, as they get to, set to unleash Pandora's box with unlimited transfers and pay players to come and play and 7 figures to be a quarterback at Alabama, I just have a very, very hard time believing that this is, I would say this is a little deal to answer the, to play along with the segment. It's a little deal, but with all of this money being sloshed around completely out in the open, they're not even using an envelope anymore. They're just saying, hey, come for us, $50,000. We'll get you a deal and, you'll eat queso for 5 minutes and we'll give you this money. I just can't get bent out of shape and lose, I just can't lose much sleep over this right now, Tommy. I just can't.
I don't lose any sleep at all, until there's resolution.
Does not appear to be forthcoming any time in the near future at all.
And you know what? They're the defending national champs. They won the championship in April. So it's they could go out and they could get bounced in the first round next year, and Bill Self could be suspended the entire year.
That would be a joke,
but
if he's
you know
suspended
what?
for the
They're
whole
national
year.
champions,
But yeah,
so whatever.
we get it. Going back to back for championships is great, but yeah, like we said when Christian Brown left, you know what? You want a championship? You want us a championship? God bless you. God bless you, David McCormick. God bless you, Ochai Abaji. Go and be successful. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you've done for us. Wrapping things up here on the show, going to run through some of our favorite stories and segments we've ever covered on the Cog Pod. I don't know how many you brought. I've got a couple here that I wanted to go through. We've had some very good, let's say, discussions over the years, maybe even some disagreements and some arguments, and obviously a lot of very, very big stories to discuss. What stands out to you as we celebrate our 100th episode of being on the Cog Pod here? What are some of the special stories and some of your favorite segments that we've done? And it doesn't have to be with me. It could be some with Weston as well before I started coming aboard. But any that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think for me, nothing against you or Weston.
I know exactly where this is going to go.
Great discussions and disagreements over the years, but it's the interviews that we've done, and we haven't done one in a while. maybe
are you saying that maybe in 2023 we need to get back on that?
We've
okay.
That might not be a terrible idea. But we've had some good interviews and some good guests on the show over the 100 episodes that we've had. I think of man, who?
Oh, of course, yeah. The biggest that's immediately who I thought
Goodman.
of. You thought you were going with that.
When the whole Greg Marshall story broke near the end of 2020, and Jeff Goodman, college basketball writer, insider, he's the one that broke the story about the allegations against Greg Marshall, came on the show. And I always tell this story to people. I reached out to him because he was doing some local media.
Yep.
He was on a couple of the local sports talk shows and things like that. And so I just literally slid into his DMs and asked if he would join the podcast. And I fooled him. I think he thought that we were a legitimate podcast because he responded right away and said, sure, that'd be great. His availability was, it only worked with my schedule. It didn't work with you or Weston at the time. So I did the interview with him by myself. And I think we had actually released a show like the day before. Yes. And then we did a bonus show with him to get the show out. And it was just he and I in that interview.
It was a good interview.
It was like a 20-minute long interview. He was very gracious with his time. And we talked quite a bit about everything that had gone on. And some of the things that he said to me were things that were not in his article. And so I sort of felt like we were breaking some of the information a little bit. And that was by far, and I think I've got the stats that I saved, by far our most listened to show and our most watched show on YouTube, without a doubt. And I think it was because people in Wichita were craving that information and wanted to know everything that had been going on. So I think of all the different interviews we had, Scott Welsh on the show at one point. He was the general manager at Crestview Country Club talking about the Wichita Open. We had Aaliyah Funchell on the show who covered Wichita State and has a sports talk show herself, does a lot of things in the world of sports. We've had a lot of Matt Beatty's been on the show a few different times, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw, he rebranded his NIL company.
Mass Strategies, that's right.
Mass Strategies, but Mass Street.
There you
Mass,
go.
Mass
Very
ST
nicely
for short.
done.
Play off the Mass Street and Lawrence. Clever right there. So we've had some good guests on the show over the years.
We'll have to get back to that here in the
so
2023 after we turn the calendar. That might not be a bad idea. I have to say my favorite thing on the show was being proven right about David McCormick. Because I was just so relentlessly and needlessly, baselessly attacked on that position. I'm so glad that I never wavered. And in the end, it was David McCormick getting the game-winning baskets for Kansas. It was such poetic justice. And I know that it wasn't really you who did it, but it was extremely satisfying to watch how that all played out, I have to say.
I don't know. I don't feel like you were proven right at all.
What?
I feel like there was a flash of competency from David McCormick that was able for you to feed this thought into your head that somehow David McCormick is this game-changing player. He had a
great Final
game.
Four.
He had a good run.
He
in
was
the NCAA
great
tournament.
last year. This year he was not as good.
But he was, and yeah, he was 100% a
probably should have been the MOP,
and a big reason why Kansas was able to hang that banner. However, as a whole, he was the most frustrating player I've ever seen.
Most frustrating, more
Kansas,
frustrating than David
David
Padgett, Micah Downs.
Okay,
J.R.
he's in the top
Giddens,
5. I can think of
C.J.
Brandon
Giles
Green is probably
more
on
frustrated
that list
than those guys.
There
have been
Gerald
some
Vick. There
Brady
were some frustrating
Morningstar
players over the years, but he was definitely on that list.
I don't know. I don't get that.
Kansas.
Obviously,
That's your one. Like that's your one. Like I actually
do
something legitimate and talk about like.
I mean, I wasn't done.
We've had and like been like.
I wasn't done. No, I mean obviously the two that stand out for me are covering the national championship for KU and the Chiefs' run to the Super Bowl. Those were unbelievable that it happened to fall on a time when we were on the podcast. And I mean, certainly the Super Bowl win for the Chiefs, was like it's like a white whale moment that you just never think you're going to get because this team has consistently and repeatedly just ripped your guts out. Literally every single year, you're thinking this can't get any worse than it is right now. And then finally they make it. So I have to probably put that one even over the KU national championship because while it was so sweet and what a game that they had to win it, but there was just that cathartic release of the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl that you just, when you're alive and it's, literally your entire lifetime before that they, win a playoff game, much less get to the Super Bowl. I mean, that was an unbelievable run to watch them do that.
And nothing
you didn't
about,
exactly mention sharing time with your co-host either. You're more excited about Jeff Goodman. So those are just some of our favorite memories about the Cog Pod coming up. What do you think is going to be the most, if you had to pick what you think will be your favorite story in the next year of the Cog Pod? So I'm asking you to extrapolate a little bit here because we don't, obviously we come in, this is, live radio for lack of a better term. We don't know what's going to happen. This isn't a scripted show where we know what's going to happen next week and the week after that. We kind of just react to what's going to happen. What do you think is going to be your favorite thing that happens on the show in the next year? And what do you think is going to be the biggest story that happens in the next year?
I think that some of it, I don't know if I can narrow it down to just one. I think the one thing that I think we know is coming, and it's just going to be a matter of when, and it might be in the next couple of weeks, is more news on conference realignment. And that's something that we've talked about quite a bit on the show, as opposed to being like, all right, well, yeah, we're going to talk about the Chiefs and another playoff hunt for them and what that's, potentially going to look like. We don't know that, at all. Or, are the Royals ever going to pull themselves out of the gutter? Again, we don't know that. And so I don't know if we'd even talk about it in that way. But at least we know, or at least we have a pretty good idea, that conference realignment is not done. And so I think that as the weeks go on, as the summer rolls on, we get into fall, there's going to be more breaking on that until the dust is completely settled. That's probably the one thing that I get excited about because, I don't know, I'll admit I didn't play a lot of sports at a high level. Like I played baseball, going into high school. I never played football. I played basketball up until middle school, and I played golf. And I was a broadcaster. So I can't break down the X's and O's super well. That was one thing Weston was really good at on this show because he played college football and he could break down some of the schemes and things like that. So when we're talking about like an overall conference realignment, that's something that doesn't deal with the X's and O's. That's in my wheelhouse more. And so I would say that's probably what I'm most excited about. I think that will probably end up being,
depending on what happens, could be the biggest story. My favorite story would be KU football not being a total disaster this year. That would be my favorite story in the next year. I have a feeling, I just have a feeling that Kansas State's going to be better than people expect. I just have this feeling. Of course, I don't know when we're going to have our next show. It's going to be pretty close to college football kickoff time. So we're probably going to make our next show our Big 12 football preview, looking at KU and Kansas State, and probably taking a look at Shocker volleyball as well. But I would love to see a turnaround for Shocker volleyball. And I would love to see KU football. Obviously, I don't want to see Kansas State football do well, but it's not really up to me. I think that they are going to do well, and they may surprise people this year. So that's what's coming up later on the show. So 100 episodes in the books, Tommy. Kind of hard to believe. But there is still, of course, one last piece of business. Yeah. It is time to hit the music as we go around Wichita. It is our Wichita Whiparound. Maybe the best story that you missed in Wichita sports this week, or over the last couple of weeks, since we're not doing shows every week here in our summer siesta. Tommy, what are you bringing to the table for us this week on the show?
Yeah, well, obviously, I know that you mentioned it at the beginning of the show. TBT has been in Wichita, and there's quite a bit to talk about with that. The Aftershocks just, absolutely killed in the Coke Arena matchups that they had over the last several days. And they are one of four remaining teams left in TBT. They're going to Dayton, Ohio, with the opportunity to win $1 million. And I think that one thing that's nice about the Aftershocks and just Wichita State basketball in general is there is still so much fan support. And I know that it's been a struggle. This last season was a struggle for Wichita State and with Isaac Brown. And I know that, that where they performed versus expectations didn't really match up, but there is still rabid fan support for the basketball program and those who played at Wichita State basketball in the past. And so seeing the fans come out to Coke Arena and then just how dominant of a team they had. And there were some pretty close games. That Elam ending in place provided some really high quality entertainment for the fans and, some really nail biting moments. But hats off to the Aftershocks as they've got an opportunity to walk away with $1
million.
NBC
World Series is getting started here this weekend. That's what I'm bringing to the table. Hobart, Detterfield, and Hutchinson. Thursday. This was the first day of the tournament. The first 4 days will be in Hutchinson. It swaps over to X Stadium on the campus of Wichita State starting on Monday, August 1st. Of course, you know the address for X Stadium. Some of the local teams that will be involved include 316 Elite, the Hutchinson Monarchs. Also involved, the Liberal BJs are back once again, and the Hayesville Aviators, along with the Cheney Diamond Dogs, some of the teams that are involved in pool play this week at the NBC World Series. As you watch this, it's Armed Forces Night, and the action actually starts at noon today as you watch this on Friday the 29th up there at Hutchinson. The noon first pitch is San Diego versus Denver. Liberal plays at 3 o'clock. Cheney plays Waco at 6 o'clock, and Hayesville taking on one of the all-time great franchises. And certainly, I'd have to say, I have not been following the tournament now that I'm not doing play-by-play for it, not really up on the teams and how good they are. Seattle playing as we're recording this show, but the Seattle Studs and Santa Barbara Foresters, just based on what they have been able to accomplish at the tournament in previous years, you would have to think that they are going to be two of the big favorites. And Hayesville versus Santa Barbara, what a fantastic opening Friday night of the tournament in Hutchinson there at Cary Park, so at Hobart Detterfield. So that'll be a fantastic start to the NBC World Series as it gets shifted over to X Stadium on Monday, August 1st. Tommy, any addition?
Blake, I actually have. I've got one more. I've got one more story.
Music again there. Gee, I didn't know we were double dipping. Please continue.
Sorry about that. My bad. So some Wichita Thunder hockey news that I'm bringing to the table today that really was announced the other day. There really wasn't a whole lot of coverage on it, and so I think it kind of slipped under the radar for a lot of people. But the announcement was made that Wichita is no longer an affiliate with the Edmonton Oilers of the NHL. That announcement was made, I believe, on Wednesday. And so Edmonton made a change. They are now with the Fort Wayne Comets of the ECHL, and so that's the affiliation. Wichita is in negotiations, from what I know, with a handful of other NHL teams that are without affiliates right now, and there should be an announcement made forthcoming, but nothing to report right this second, although
when
the big story
they
is
picked
just
up that affiliation, I know that was thought of by hockey fans as, if you don't have an affiliate, that's very bad in the league that they're playing in. How big of a deal, as somebody, I know that you're not exactly in the hockey operations office there. You're selling tickets, which, by the way, I mean, if you need some season tickets, this guy on that side of the screen is probably or are you on this side of me? The guy next to me on the screen is the guy to talk to about that.
On either side. Yeah.
They made it sound like it was a big deal to not be affiliated before. Of course, they picked up the Oilers affiliation. How big of a deal is this? And from what you're saying, it sounds like this is not really influx too badly. Like this you're making it sound like it's pretty imminent that an affiliation is going to be coming.
Yeah, there should be a new affiliate for the Thunder, and to my knowledge, every team in the league has an NHL affiliate. In fact, there are more NHL teams than there are ECHL teams, and so there's, like I said, a handful of them that don't have ECHL affiliates. And I think to answer your question, it depends on the team, and really there are some teams in the ECHL that have really close symbiotic relationships with their NHL affiliate, or even their AHL, which is the AAA, with their affiliate. For Wichita and Edmonton, it was Bakersfield in California. They were the AHL affiliate. But there really, to my knowledge, there wasn't a super symbiotic relationship between Edmonton and Bakersfield and Wichita.
Sure.
It was more kind of a one-way deal where players were being called up, but there weren't necessarily players being called back down a lot, from my understanding. But there are teams in the league. For instance, I think of Newfoundland up in Canada. Their NHL affiliate is Toronto, and they share players quite a bit. And it really is kind of a true farm team for the Maple Leafs, where it just kind of depends upon the team. And you know what? I've raised this question before, and I don't really know the ins and outs of hockey and the minor league system, the way it works. I'm a baseball fan, and I have a lot of knowledge of baseball, and I've always wondered why the hockey minor leagues don't operate as much like a farm system as minor league baseball does. And I think that's a priority for the ECHL and the NHL moving forward.
I can answer that question for you. The answer is because guys can't get blowed up playing baseball for the wind surge. You bring a guy down here for the Oilers. Can you imagine? Guy, I blank on who their super young, the hot shot player for Edmonton right now. Can you imagine him coming down to Wichita and some journeyman is going to blow him through the glass? That can't happen. In baseball, it's impossible for that to happen. So to me, that's why. I mean, can you imagine like if Alex Ovechkin was on a rehab assignment and played in Wichita, how awesome that would be, and how many people would show up? It would be incredible. I would go, like, we have to cancel our plans. We've got to go and watch this, but it's just not practical because of the physicality of the sport, I think. Yeah. Your hockey ops guys may have a different opinion than me, though.
And my understanding is that, my understanding is that there should be a new affiliation.
Do we have any additions, corrections, or retractions in the near future from you?
I do. I've got a couple. Obviously, we're coming up to the MLB trade deadline. We know that Andrew Benintendi is no longer a Royal. He was traded to the New York Yankees. I want to get your thoughts. I tweeted about it the night before when the trade was made. Not a great haul, in my opinion, for the Royals based on the prospects they got back from the Yankees. And, Andrew Benintendi, he was the lone all-star for the Royals, but he's not a, franchise player by any means. That shows you how poor the Royals actually are. But I would have thought the haul would have been a little bit higher. The return would have been a little bit higher from what the Yankees were giving the Royals. Not any top 10 prospects. Top 20 prospects.
He was having a very good year. I don't know. I did not pay attention to whether or not he should have been selected or if somebody got snubbed. I think they're still doing the deal where every team has to have one all-star, which I like. I think that's fine. But, he was hitting .320. He was having his best offensive season for the Royals in terms of his batting average, was getting on base .387, again, career high. Slugging was down this year, but in terms of getting on base and batting average, he was having his best season. So, you would like to think that you would be able to get a nice return from that, but based on his position, maybe there weren't that many teams that were in need of a left fielder. I don't know. It's hard to say. But obviously you would like to get as much as possible. My addition is that the Wichita Wind Surge have their 7-game home winning streak snapped by the Northwest Arkansas Naturals. They lost 5-0 on Wednesday night. They were one hit until the last inning, so the offense was awful. But you got to look at the whole stretch of things. 7 straight home wins for the Wind Surge. They had been playing very, very well at home. So this is a team that has, after a little bit of a slow start, has started playing very, very, very well. Didn't have it last night, obviously. The Naturals guy was extremely good. Dante Biase was their starter for the Naturals. Of course, they're the Royals affiliate, so maybe that's a guy that we'll see here in the future for October call-ups. But the Wind Surge, the main story that I want to let people know is 7-game home winning streak that they had before last night. Hopefully they'll get that rolling tonight and into this weekend. One more ACR from you?
I do, yeah. So I think we'd be remiss to not mention a couple of notes about the Kansas City Chiefs. They announced on Thursday that they had signed a veteran pass rusher Carlos Dunlap to a 1-year contract. That's kind of an area where the Chiefs needed some help. They ranked near the bottom of the NFL a year ago in sacks. Really, we didn't see a whole lot of pressure last year, and that's an area that I know Frank Clark is going to need to step up in this upcoming season for Kansas City. He's kind of underperformed with the deal that he has with Kansas City and then finding somebody opposite of him. So they were able to bring in Carlos Dunlap. I know that they made a couple of draft selections back in April to hopefully help with that a little bit, but of course those guys are going to be super young. So Carlos Dunlap is a veteran and hopefully can bring some good poise there to the defense for Kansas City. And then also Travis Kelce reworked his contract. He'll make $3 million more this season.
What a sweetheart.
He was allotted to. So definitely a change in contract there for him. Yeah, absolutely. So those are the couple of Chiefs
Tommy,
notes
there's
I
episode
have,
100 in the books. It's been
show.
A pleasure for, I don't know how many, 50, half of it. I don't know how many I've been a part of in terms of the percentage, but it's been fun, and we'll see if we make it to 200. That's the goal, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say before we wrap up, for the few of you that listen to the show and that have been regulars on, listening and downloading the show for the last 2.5 years that we've been on and the 100 episodes that we've done it. I want to say thank you. This really, I don't want to speak for you, Blake, but I know for me, I was a radio
I still feel like I am radio broadcaster, even though I'm not on the radio
anymore. And this, yeah. And
sure.
So this for me kind of scratches that itch that I have once every couple of weeks to, even if nobody ever listens to this show, just having an opportunity to talk sports and just kind of feel like, I've got a mic.
That couldn't have been more, to feel like I got a microphone and we go to a black screen. Something's wrong with your audio because I'm getting like double feed over there. I don't know. There's a red triangle on your page. Oh man. Well, we're going to wrap it up here because we do get double audio. But Tommy, I appreciate you and Weston, of course, inviting me along. It's been very, very fun to be a part of this program. And we will see what the next 100 episodes have in store for the Keeper of the Games podcast. Once again, I don't even know if he has audio, so I'll just tell you. You can find him at Tweets from Tommy. I am at, of course, B.E. Cripps, BECRIPPS, and we are at COGPod, KOGPOD on Twitter. And like Tommy said, thank you guys to everybody who watched, listened, downloads the show, shares it with a friend. We really appreciate it. We will see you next time on the Keeper of the Games.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Visit our website at cogsports.com. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's KOG Pod.